Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Tech in 10, the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs post-game show from the Ruston Daily Leader. I am sports editor Matt Bellinson, coming to you after Louisiana Tech's 24-0 victory over Southeastern Louisiana to open the 2025 football season. Not the prettiest win in the world, and we'll get into that in a second, but a win's a win for this program. You start 2025 off with a victory over an opponent you needed to beat, and the Bulldogs are sitting pretty and entering September doing exactly what they needed to do. So I'm enjoying, obviously, this is season number 4 covering the Bulldogs, and I'm looking forward to these post-game recap videos as well. So just want to dive right into my thoughts on tonight's game. I think the biggest takeaway is the defense. And obviously, takeaway kind of speaks for itself. This defense had 3 takeaways tonight, 2 interceptions, including and also an 80-yard scoop and score by Cam Franklin. I think when you look back at this defense last year, they were so good at keeping people, out of the end zone, doing a really good job, against the run. I think the one maybe kind of area you would say is a weakness, quote unquote, last year was they just didn't really take the ball away at a high level. Tonight you did that. And including, you obviously came away with a defensive score as well. So it's an encouraging sign for this defense. Obviously under first-year defensive coordinator Luke Olson, to see that, not only are they taking the ball away, but when opponents drive the length of the field, when they get inside your territory, this defense was very opportunistic tonight. I think twice Southeastern got inside their 20-yard line and came away with 0 points. That's massive. And again, it's an FCS opponent. This is not the quality of competition that you're going to be facing all season long. But at the same time, it's a college football program, and you lined up against them for 60 plus minutes, and you were able to shut them out. And I think that's a big deal. Cindy Cumming mentioned the last 8 quarters played at the stadium. You shut your opponent out. Now again, that's Kennesaw State and Southeastern Louisiana, so let's just keep that for context. But I certainly feel like it's an encouraging sign. This defense was obviously thrown into kind of some turmoil in the offseason, losing defensive coordinator Jeremiah Johnson. A lot of the defensive staff left with him, and it was kind of a question mark. Obviously, the defensive line, there was just so much turnover on this defense that you were really wondering how they would look. I was not super impressed with their run defense tonight, frankly. You saw that first drive that Southeastern kind of ran it down their throat. I was kind of amazed that Carson Camp and that play call decided to let's throw it 20-plus yards down the field in a double coverage when we just ran for 7 yards a carry on the first drive. But, I'm not a play caller. But obviously, Jakari Foster for Louisiana Tech took advantage and was able to come up with the interception. But, the run defense for Louisiana Tech was not strong tonight. I mean, what Southeastern 128 yards. It's not the worst, rushing total in the world, but I think if you were watching the totality of this game, there were definitely moments, especially on third down. I think Southeastern, 50% on third down, 9 of 18 on third down, and a lot of those came, on the run, kind of ground game. They really hurt Louisiana Tech out of the middle. A lot of draw plays, a couple designs as well. So I was not overly impressed with the run defense tonight. I think that can improve over time, but again, I think the bottom line is you pitched a shutout at home. You got 3 takeaways. And I think, frankly, some of the stars of this defense that we expected to play well this year, at least for game 1, that they came ready to play. Kobe Fields, Conference USA preseason Defensive Player of the Year. Let's just go through his stat line real quick. Leads the entire game with 13 tackles, 1 sack, and has a tackle for loss. And then his running mate, Sifa Leota, who had a couple bad penalties, kind of some undisciplined play, but he certainly made up for it with 12 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a pass breakup that led to Zion Nason's big man touchdown. And then Mekai Mason, 9 total tackles, 2 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss. I think when your linebacking core is doing that, I think you have a pretty good shot to win. So that's just my overall takeaway. Is I think the defense played really well tonight, and I think the stars of this defense in particular, I think, rose to the occasion. This defense was really aggressive. They were bringing pressure from a lot of different looks. I think it helped that, frankly, Southeastern's quarterbacks, you saw basically every single drive, they put in a new guy out there, behind center. So they certainly didn't really have confidence in their quarterbacks, no matter who was out there. But I think Louisiana Tech was able to kind of pin their ears back and just fly around because this offense for Southeastern was not really threatening. They had a couple of nice run drives and did some things well in the ground game, but passing-wise, it was just a statue at the quarterback position. So Louisiana Tech was able to tee off, and I think certainly build some confidence. Again, when you're coming off a historic defensive season like Louisiana Tech did last year, finishing as a top 15 unit, I think there were a lot of questions. Can this defense, produce at that level again? Can they match that? And again, for game one against an FCS opponent, you did your job, you pitch a shutout, and you have 3 takeaways. Like you can't ask for more than that if you're a defense. You also force 7 punts and 2 turnovers on downs for what it's worth. So overall, just a great defensive performance tonight, and one that I think if you're a Louisiana Tech fan, you certainly hope that continues, because as we transition to this offense, I mean, you saw it. I was not pleased, and I think overwhelmed by this offense tonight. Again, they had the 3 straight scoring drives, and that was certainly encouraging. But I guess I expected more. We heard so much in the offseason from Sonny Cumbie that Tony Franklin and this offense were ahead of schedule. They were ahead of schedule by Louisiana Tech standards, and they felt very confident that this offense was in a good position to produce. And they felt confident with the playmakers that they had in place, and obviously Trey Kukuk. It was named the starting quarterback, and is going to take the reins of this offense moving forward. You certainly saw tonight, that they're going to give him a lot of opportunities to be a runner. But bottom line was, I mean, you basically didn't play a half of football, and I think that's the really upsetting part. If you're a Louisiana Tech fan, is the fun of bringing Tony Franklin back and kind of reliving the glory days of this offense, and we're going to put a bunch of points, and we got this really good, interesting, community college quarterback that this coaching staff likes. Okay, let's see what this coaching staff can do, and then you barely squeak by with 3 points in the first half. I was doing some research. If Louisiana Tech had not kicked that field goal, it would have been the first time since 2006 that they would have been shut out in the first half at home. So it certainly was a very disappointing first half offensively. But I think, the disappointment is not only related to this game, but I think it kind of correlates to last year too. I mean, there's so many games where Louisiana Tech just does not play for a quarter, for a half at a time. And then obviously we saw last year, you're playing behind the 8 ball. You're trying to catch up and see if you can work things out as the game goes along. And at certain points in the season, Louisiana Tech was able to do that. At certain points, they weren't. I don't think if you're playing an FBS Conference USA opponent tonight, I'm not sure you win this game. Frankly, obviously the defense did its job and had a really great performance. So maybe if the defense does that, you still have a shot. But offensively, I mean, the first quarter ends and you had 10 yards of total offense. You go into the half with 7 punts. I mean, I guess I just don't really understand what takes this offense so long year after year, regardless of quarterback, regardless of play caller, why it takes them so long to get into a rhythm. Trey Kukuk, and Sonny Cumbie both mentioned tonight that the second half, Tony Franklin came down from the press box and called plays on the sideline, and they felt like that was really comfortable for this offense. This is what they've done throughout fall camp. It's what they've done throughout scrimmages, and for whatever reason, Tony wanted to start the game in the press box, and clearly there was a lack of energy, there was a lack of focus and execution, and Trey and Sonny Cumbie, both felt that the change was needed in the second half, and Tony came down and it worked out. But bottom line is, I mean, Southeastern outgained you tonight. That's just an objective fact, and again, obviously they were shut out on the scoreboard, but they outgained your new look offense with this high flying coordinator and this new quarterback, and so I definitely think if you want to look at this from an optimistic view, definitely focus on the defense. If you want to look at it from a pessimistic view, when Sonny Cumbie talks to us in the offseason about how this offense is going to look different, basically definitely for 2 quarters, I could even throw in probably the fourth quarter as well. For really 3 quarters tonight, this offense looked pretty much the same. A lot of 3 and outs. A lot of lateral movement offensively, not a lot of downfield shots, not a lot of attacking. And certainly I understand that Tony Franklin wants to get the quarterback run game involved, and he wants to be ground and pound, and you saw a lot of different guys shuffling out of the backfield tonight. And I think there were some opportunities that Trey kind of moved the pocket a little bit. He hit Eli Finley and Marlon Jackson for a couple nice plays, Dedrick Latulis as well. A couple nice plays down the seam, a couple of plays for some big chunks here and there. But by and large, the passing game was really not a threat tonight. So by and large, I was not impressed offensively. Again, you put up 24 points. 7 of that, 6 of that, I guess you should say, comes from your defense. But I guess obviously there's still 11 more games left to go in the regular season. This offense has time to develop. So I'm not saying the sky is falling by any means, but certainly that first half. I mean, we all watched it. You were almost shut out by Southeastern at home. So I guess bottom line is offensively, I liked what I saw. I guess from Trey as a runner. Passing wise, Hayden Chrisman really struggled at left tackle tonight. He got beat in pass pro multiple occasions. I didn't really see what Southeastern finished with sacks wise, but it certainly was with more than two. I definitely felt like there were some pocket presence issues for Trey at times. I felt like he wanted to climb the pocket at certain points, but then also just kind of stood there. I think passing wise, there's still a lot to be desired from this offense, and then obviously, I think just kind of finishing drives. There were multiple opportunities again. Jakari Foster opens the game with an interception, and then you go 3 and out. Like you just cannot do that in against Conference USA competition. You cannot do that next week when you go and play LSU. So I think by and large, offensively, again, you win the game. That's great. But offensively, there is a lot of work to be done. And I think, Sonny Cumbie, for as much as they talked about how confident they were in the offseason, I think you basically heard from him tonight that was a lot of coach speak. He even said tonight in his opening statement that with these first games in the transfer portal era and the NIL era where rosters are being turned over at such a high rate, you really don't know how your team is going to start a season. And so I think Louisiana Tech, again, I'm not using it as an excuse. That's just what Sonny Cumbie said. He certainly felt like, the first quarter, the first half, there was just a lack of energy. There was a lack of focus, guys playing tentative. And again, maybe some of that has to do with guys being in new positions, new coordinators. But I think by and large, you certainly want to see better execution. And so I'm curious to see if Louisiana Tech can at least put up a competitive fight next week against LSU. And then you come back home the following week and an open conference play with New Mexico State. That's the game that really matters. So, overall, Louisiana Tech wins the game. You start 2025 off with a win. Obviously, the disaster scenario would have been if that offense had not put it together and your defense was not able to get a score for you. If you had somehow lost this game tonight, that would have been the disaster scenario. But, again, Louisiana Tech handles business. They open 2025 with a win and are able to go into Baton Rouge next week with some confidence, playing the Tigers at Death Valley. So, overall, defense pitched a really good game, and then offense had a little bit of a spurt of competence, but outside of that, there's a lot of work to be done. So, by and large, Louisiana Tech 1-0, and that's all you can really ask for if you're a Louisiana Tech fan at this point. So, that's going to do it for this edition of Tech in 10. I appreciate you guys listening and following along. I did tweet out real quick. This is my 4th season covering Louisiana Tech. I really do appreciate everyone who follows, watches, listens, subscribes, does all the things that helps out the Ruston Leader. We really appreciate everyone who follows along during football season. So looking forward to another interesting football season at Louisiana Tech. Again, the Bulldogs start 1-0 in 2025. Plenty more Tech in 10 post-game shows on the way, so stay tuned for that. But for now, this is going to do it from Joe Ice Stadium. I'm sports editor Matt Bellinson. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.